Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Ad-Hoc Harwich Parking Committee meeting. Today is February 5. Just for your notification, there is a recording as required by law. The town may audio and video record the meeting. Any person intending to either audio or video record this meeting session is required to inform the chair. First order of business is old business, the minutes. Do I hear a
Motion to approve.
Second?
second? Excellent. The new business, I'm going to take this.
Gotta vote.
Oh, we got the vote, I'm sorry. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, under new business, I'm going to take this, the chair is going to take the privilege of taking it out of order. B, which is police, fire, and highway, these folks are all working and consequently like to get them through so they can continue their daily duties.
We did want them here, though, for the Anchorage discussion as well, though.
Okay,
So they're kind of part and parcel.
all right. So, going back to what I previously said, I'll reverse it. It's like politics. We'll do the folks from Anchorage condominium.
Thank you for the consideration.
So, whomever's going to speak for the condominium complex, would you please step forward, identify yourself?
My name is Ralph Porter.
Good morning, Ralph.
Good morning. Okay,
Morning.
John, how are you?
Great, how are you?
So, the Anchorage condominium has some questions with regard to parking in the vicinity of the condominium complex, as well as access to the parking lot. Would you care to speak to those subjects?
Yes, first of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about the concerns that we have. Some 4 years ago, two of us met on location with the then town planner, who was very informative and provided us with a copy of a Harwich Port parking study that was done in September of 2014. It included, among other things, a quote-unquote low-cost, short-term option, which is essentially what is in place at this time, and which he at that time felt should not be done because of the safety concerns related to tight spaces. He said that the decision had been made to approach the TD Bank about leasing part of their lot, and that was subsequently done and has been implemented shortly thereafter. Unfortunately, the signage has never been really conspicuous enough for people to realize that it's available, and often the lot was empty when the other part of it was filled right to capacity. The current situation was dangerous during the summer months for a number of reasons. Schoolhouse Road, as many of you may realize, is not recognized, probably by the majority of people, as even being a street, a thoroughway between Route 28 and Pleasant Street. Signage for the street is buried in a maze of other signage and surrounding shrubbery and things, and there is no dividing line down the middle of the street. The turn-in is extremely narrow, especially with the extra-sized handicap spaces that have been placed in the narrowest part of the street. The yellow divider really needs to run through the entire length of the street. There is not adequate signage when you get to where the center parking spaces are, such as a sign that would say, "Keep right." The only thing that's there is an arrow on the ground, and that isn't always seen clearly. When approaching the parking spaces in the middle of the street, coming in either direction, that's true. With vehicles backing out of the 3 rows of parking into narrow lanes for traffic, it really is a disaster waiting to happen. People are packing and unpacking their cars, children are darting around. The congestion cannot be considered anything but dangerous. There have been some situations where people pull out forward from a center space and then are heading into the oncoming traffic in a one-way portion of the street. It's a great setup for accidents or even a little bit of road rage. From the standpoint of those of us living at the Anchorage, there are two problems that we're especially concerned about. When we pull out of the driveway to our parking lot, we can only turn right because of the one-way traffic lanes. The choice is then to add more traffic to the already heavy summer traffic on Route 28 or make a tight left turn at the end of the row of cars parked in the middle of the street, thus contributing to the congestion already present and setting up, again, for possible accidents or worse in order to exit onto Pleasant Street. Most of us during the summer go out that way in order to avoid 28. Another safety issue with the present setup. Likewise, turning onto Schoolhouse Road from Route 28 requires traveling the one-way lane on the right all the way to the end of the row of cars parked in the middle of the street, now requiring, again, a dangerous narrow U-turn onto the other one lane in order to take a right into our parking lot. The major problem for us, however, is fire and emergency access to our parking lot from Schoolhouse Road. I don't think these vehicles could maneuver a right turn into our driveway if they I know they couldn't, if they access Schoolhouse Road from Pleasant Street. If they came from Route 28, they would encounter the first few middle of the street parking spaces and the sign that I think needs to go up to let people know they have to go one way, and would not be able to take the required left turn. It seems like there's really not going to be any way for them to get easily into our parking lot. I think, you know, it would result, I think, in the town being responsible for whatever happened to anybody as a result of this. The first 6 middle spaces closest to Route 28 really should be removed now, because they are really a problem. If anybody needed to have the assistance of you folks, I think it would be difficult for us to get it. I'm glad that there are representatives here from the fire, police, and highway departments this morning, and hope they will be able to comment on these matters. We do want you to know that we do not want businesses in Harwichport to fail. Part of the reason we live here is for the convenience and enjoyment of the shops, the restaurants, and the other businesses. We love the music and the port. There definitely needs to be some innovative approach to handling summer parking, and it is definitely not going to be accomplished with the potentially dangerous middle-of-the-street parking that is currently in place. Summer will be coming, and with it the great increase in our population. We need to find safe ways to accommodate those who want to enjoy our community. I've heard some really interesting and innovative ideas brought forth at these meetings, and I hope that these are successful and soon implemented. However, we also need to look at the dangerous current situation on Schoolhouse Road and remedy it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
A copy of what you read?
Yes.
I'll give you one. I'll have to make it and give it to you.
Okay, thank you. All right, as you've already indicated, we have members of the Police, Fire, and Highway Department here. We received a letter from the fire chief relative to the design of that parking lot and what was put into it in order to design it the way it currently is. So if all three have heard the concerns put out by the Anchorage folks. Could I ask each of you, if you would, come up and just to address whether there can be changes made and if they're practical or impractical, anything to address some of the concerns of the condominium complex.
Good morning, committee. Chief Norm Clarke. First and foremost, I can appreciate the concerns of all the citizens in town for their safety. And I I want you to trust me in that is first and foremost in my mind, safety of the citizens and the visitors. I think subjectively I can look into the what's going on, is that they're concerned about a lot of people being in their neighborhood. I get that. But objectively, I was included in the initial discussions about this parking lot, and I have to commend the Director of Highways and the Police Chief that we talk routinely about these types of things. So it wasn't a surprise in that I got a call saying, hey, we changed the parking lot, hope it works for you guys, because that's just not the case. We were involved right from the get-go about the needs of the community, needs of the business community, about squeezing more parking out of the town lot, and that was done. I did an initial study myself when it was proposed on paper. We further did on-site study with vehicles, including the largest vehicle in our fleet, and we are able to get in and get out. Certainly, staff vehicles and the ambulances can traverse more easily, if that makes sense, than maybe the pumper or the ladder truck. But that's not unique to this town. We have streets in this town that are narrower than the town parking lot, and we have to traverse them. Many of the streets off of Lower County Road, we drive in, we have to back out. So we're accustomed to that, and we adapt our responses. We adapt our sensitivity as the population grows during holiday periods and certainly during the summer. But as a fact of matter, that we have no issues of getting into the rear of 15 Pleasant Street or traversing the roadway from either direction, from Pleasant or from Route 28. We can traverse those. Something that I think about is that I actually find the parking lots to be a little bit safer when they're full, because that slows traffic down. When there's 12 cars in the parking lot of any parking lot, traffic is faster, and you still have pedestrian traffic. So we do not have, I can't recall, and I did a quick data search of pedestrian accidents at that particular parking lot, and I didn't find any. That's not to say that my good friend Chief Gomet might have some accidents in the parking lot. There were no personal injury accidents as a result of this change that I could find. I think my letter speaks for itself. I am many times you have to take a position, and maybe they won't be happy with my testimony to the committee, but those are the facts as I see them.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the information. If I may ask Chief Gilmet to address the same issue.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dave Gilmet, Chief of Police. I guess just as a little preface, obviously, I sit here before you as a public safety practitioner, not as a parking engineer or anything like that. So all I can say is I polled our deputy chief, I polled the former operations lieutenant. I had conversations with both of them. I have looked at the new design in the parking lot, both when it's full and empty. I was down there again yesterday because I had a little confusion as to where actually Anchorage was. I thought it was actually the other one behind Mad Minnow, but now I've finally figured it out. But I have looked at both driveways on either side of that parking lot, and I'm in agreement with Chief Clarke that as far as emergency vehicle access and egress, we have no issues. There's no question it's tight. That parking lot is a challenge when it's full. There's no question about that. And, it's tight, and I understand the reason for the arrow. We were just discussing that this morning, that forces a right-hand turn out of Anchorage condos. That's because there isn't enough room when the lot's full to get two cars to pass in that one lane there. So it pretty much has to be a one-way. And I understand that. Again, I'm not an engineering guru as far as what would be the absolute best layout. All I can tell you is, and I did not research any accidents. I'm not aware of any personally. I can certainly do that if the board would like me to. I'm not aware of it. The deputy chief or the lieutenant did not advise me of any major issues there, and neither one of them had any concerns with how it's been going since the new pattern went into effect.
Just Al, so I can comment on both chiefs just said regarding accidents. the police will definitely attest to it, and even fire, when we have down wires and stuff, I call right away if there is, and we haven't had any accidents down there. And like I've stated, I mean, I'm in that area quite a number of hours in a day. So yeah, there haven't been any accidents down there, while the new configuration. Another reason why too, during the summer 2 years ago, if you're looking at how the lines are now, people would illegally park going down, making their own way of getting, which was even worse for people to get out and maneuver, because you just, and it was not even just on a Wednesday night, it was like the dinner crowd from a Thursday through Sunday. So, I mean, not, right now, it doesn't seem like it's the ideal for some, but it's a lot better than what that was.
Right, if I may, the only concern we actually had with Schoolhouse was that initial entrance from Pleasant be posted for no parking. We originally had to do temporary posting on stroll nights, but now I believe there are permanent signs there, and the only issue is making sure they're visible, you know, from the shrubberies trimmed away from them. That's basically our only concern, because that would severely limit access into the back of that lot if it was jammed with cars on either side.
Anybody on the board have any questions for the chief?
No question, but I do agree with the shrubbery coming in off of Pleasant. It's overgrown, it's out into the right-of-way, and the signs are difficult to see.
Right, and there
The
are
ones that There are
signs.
two.
Yep.
But you have to look for them.
Right, and there is. There's the public parking there. The new, where the bank additional parking is, there's a public sign there. But you have to really look when you're coming around that corner, so.
Chief, thank you very much for
You're
your
welcome.
time. All right, we have somebody from the Highway Department as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lynn Cooper, DPW Director. Essentially, we're the line painters. This was designed, as Chief Clarke stated before. We were all participated in the development of how this was. It fell on the town engineer to develop it to standards, MUTCD standards, and that was done. We engaged a private contractor to paint the lot, to stripe it. The private contractor that does, and he's absolutely awesome, who does this for a living, said, you're a little tight here, you're a little tight here. So we actually, I think in total, didn't paint in 3 or 4 spaces that was on the plan, just because it made sense to move it. We since had one issue, we went back and did some more painting on it to help some of the businesses that were having a problem, a mark of no parking or something like that. We're amenable to doing whatever, you know, either the Board of Selectmen or the Police Department feels is necessary for public safety. As far as the back entrance to that road, it is a public road and a public right-of-way. It's only about 17 or 18 feet and does not meet a standard for a double yellow line. We have some roads like that. Lover's Lane doesn't meet the standard. You really need 20 feet of pavement in order to paint a double yellow. And that's what's recommended under the MUTCD code. I'd be happy to entertain any questions you may have.
Anybody on the board got any questions for Mr. Hooper?
That was painless.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So as I understand our conversation here, the only thing that really has to be addressed is the trimming as entering Schoolhouse Road in order to make the size more visible for the public. Beyond that, it seems as though the parking lot was well-researched. There does not appear to be any influx or any number of accidents that result from parking and traffic flow through that parking lot. Anybody have any thoughts with regard to this so far?
Question would be, the shrubs, I'm assuming, are owned by the acreage?
And Mr. Porter brought up a good question, and I don't know how it can, and this is probably back to Link, sorry, Link. Is there anything, and I don't think there's a spot where you could safely put a sign or anything that says one way? What, you know, where the new lines are that we put in there? I know that they're concerned about having people know that that's a one-way before you get to it. There's not any space there that you could really put, and, yeah, and you can't put a,
It is painted on the ground.
yeah, you've got the arrows, correct, I'm sorry.
Just, no, if anybody's speaking from the audience,
Yes.
when this is reviewed, nobody's gonna be able to hear anybody in the audience. They need to come.
All right, may I ask you to step forward?
Sorry.
Well, Chris Nickerson, the road manager for the highway department. That is painted on the ground, the arrows are, for both directionals, and we actually added in as requested, a double yellow center line headed north through Schoolhouse Road to divert people both directions around the center line parking. We have also tried to work with, for the last couple of years, the Anchorage to get those shrubs pruned along the edge of the road. Be happy to do it. If they're not able to.
All right, well, I will check with Anchorage and see if it's feasible for them as well.
I think as a practical matter, when that parking lot's full, you can only go one way.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you're not gonna be able to go the other way. Certainly in the summertime, I mean, in the wintertime now, people go
Whichever.
any which way you want.
Yeah.
And I have tried it myself, gone into the Anchorage parking lot and pulled out when it's full in the summertime. I have an Expedition, which is a large vehicle, and I have been able to, you do have to turn right, but you can't go left around that corner. And we did eliminate, I know, at least 2 spaces in between where Mason Tree Service
Exactly.
and the other
Yes.
lot is to the Anchorage,
Yep.
just to give a little bit more space. We kind of made it all no parking, so.
Right.
I mean, it is a little tight, but you can certainly make it work.
So the bottom line is, it's not an ideal situation, but it is a legal situation. The way it's been set up, the parking lot, it meets all the standards for the state of Massachusetts, as far as I know, in a public way. So consequently, I don't feel as though there's going to be any major changes as we see it with regard to that roadway and the parking lot as it stands right now. The only other thing that was brought up by Mr. Nickerson was the fact that the hedges, which have been a concern, are apparently the property of the Anchorage. That might be, in order to assist the town, have those trimmed back so that they will allow the signage to be viewed by the public as they enter the roadway. Anybody else?
Mr. Chair. Through Chris Nick, I believe. Are there enough arrows facing north and south that people know? Or is it, in your opinion, that we need additional? I've seen the arrows. I just don't know if you think more would be helpful.
Well, if I may, this is the Google Earth image. This is coming out of. I could potentially add another arrow back here at where the two-lane road comes out. I could place one more arrow back here, but I'm concerned that might get confusing because, you know, you don't really know which way you have to go till you get out here. At the beginning of the center line parking, oops, went away from it. But at the beginning of the center line, I've lost it now. But at the beginning of the center line parking, there's an arrow for the right side, sending them that direction, and an arrow on the left, sending people out.
Okay.
And I'm not saying there's not, I was just curious. I
Yeah.
think it would.
Right. Based upon Mr. Nickerson's description, it doesn't appear as though it would be feasible without causing some confusion regarding motorists coming in. So it may not be practical at this stage. However, if the DPW decides to put one in, it might help the situation. That was pretty convoluted, but, all right,
I think there's, I mean, just as it was prior, like Cindy had mentioned, and even in this report, people were just haphazardly parking in the middle.
yeah.
Terrible.
And that's dangerous, and certainly there's no way for traffic, and who knows where they're gonna park, and certainly for safety vehicles trying to get in and out, it's not gonna be conducive to that. But now it's orderly. It may be a little inconvenient for a couple months in the summertime, but I think that's the best, given that particular lot that we have right now, without changing the lot entirely, like it did mention in the report.
Yes, Chief.
I just want to reassure that the residents of the Anchorage that especially during Music in the Port and pretty much all summer, we make sure that those roadways and that access to that rear of that, amongst other areas. That's not the only place that we check, but we are diligent about that. And I will speak for the police chief on this. I know there are extra patrols during those high volume areas. That the people, we know the people are at the Anchorage. We know that it's a high risk property in my world, and it's routinely inspected or eyes on that property by myself every day that I work. It's part of my routine, and we double those efforts, triple those efforts during the summer months, and especially during Music in the Port, the Christmas stroll. We make sure that that they are a priority amongst other areas in Harwich Port with high volumes of people and traffic.
Thank you. I think both chiefs have assured the folks at the Anchorage that they are a priority, and they're well aware, both departments are well aware of the 32 apartments which are there, and all the folks that do live there. So they have done a very, very good job over the last number of years with regard to the high volume traffic downtown. Public safety on both sides have addressed it. And if it makes you feel any better, you are in such close proximity to the service of both these public safety entities that I suspect you're being well taken care of. Anybody else? Anything? No?
Nothing.
You got anything? No? All right, I just want to say thank you very much for coming in. I appreciate it. What I wanted to do is, we'll get to the next presentation, was Mr. Cohn. Do you want to get something first?
No, I just wondered if there was anything else that we wanted to ask of these gentlemen while they're here as to any alternatives or thoughts that they may have to help alleviate parking. I don't know if they're aware, but we discussed at the last couple of meetings having a shuttle bus for employees they'd park at we're looking at the Bank Street up at the old Harbor Masters building, having people park there and having a shuttle go down, during the days, or if you have any other thoughts. I didn't know if you wanted to take advantage while they were here.
Again, like my friend, the police chief, I'm not an engineer in traffic patterns, whatever, but sure, shuttle. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen to the old Bank Street Fire Station. That lot may come available. And the other thing that I would encourage all of the citizens of the town, and certainly our duly elected representatives, pressure the state to get that sidewalk fixed or created to Saquatucket. That is absolutely a viable parking area during those mentioned events in Harwich Port. Absolutely is a parking area that can be used, but not now. I wouldn't encourage anybody to park at Saquatucket and walk to Harwich Port. That would be negligent on my part. So we were turned down for the grant, state money, and I'm appalled by that. It's a state road, and the state put a lot of money to help the citizens build that harbor and turned us down on a safety issue and something that should happen. So I would encourage from this committee to pressure the states, pressure our local representatives to get that sidewalk fixed. That would help alleviate some of the parking in Harwich Port. Guaranteed.
Yeah, it's excellent. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Mr. Chair, no, I've given it some considerable thought since I knew the meeting was coming up, but I really, as police chief, I really don't have much to offer as far as further ideas on mitigating the parking situation down there. The employee shuttle bus, yeah, that's a great idea. My only I have no suggestions on route or anything on that, just as long as I'm be a little bit more concerned about the drop-off location, as long as it was a safe drop-off location, but other than that, unfortunately, I don't have any magic cures for what's going on, and I'm sure there's a lot of other communities that are facing the same challenge. But I appreciate you, putting the time in an attempt to address it.
Let me ask you this, when and if the shuttle bus becomes part of this operation, would you like to be kept appraised as to what the decisions have been made relative to where the buses are going to stop, or the bus?
Sure, absolutely. Yep,
Okay.
yep.
Now, the other thing is, getting to Chief Clarke's discussion about the harbor, and this is a little bit beyond what we've been talking about. Does it seem reasonable if a shuttle were to be used to and from that parking lot? This is in the future. Does it seem reasonable, given the current volume of traffic on 28 in the summertime, to use a shuttle bus to transport, with your concern, both of your concerns, is the pedestrian traffic down to the harbor? Any thoughts on that?
A shuttle to the harbor
To
from
the
somewhere
harbor,
else?
From Harwich Port, as opposed to having people traverse the non-existing sidewalk.
Well, that's
on
much
28.
safer, there's no question about that. I would support that idea. Anything to keep pedestrians off 28 with no sidewalk.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you for your input.
Okay.
All right. No other questions, I'm assuming, from the committee? All right. All right, we have a presentation by Mr. Bob Cohen regarding traffic.
Parking.
Parking, I'm sorry. So far, everything's been traffic. Myself.
I'm assuming the public had no questions for the
Yeah.
chiefs.
Well, by the way, before we do this, thank you, John. Does anybody in the public have any questions for the folks who have spoken?
Just wanted to point out that there may not have been any accidents yet. If you have a chance to go through there when it's very busy, people are backing in, they are going out the wrong way, they're running into head-on coming traffic. I know it's not your job to worry about people watching their kids, but kids are running around while their parents are putting things in and out of the car. It is a dangerous situation. So just wanted to reiterate that.
I want to thank you very much for your input. We appreciate it. I don't think the chiefs or the, Mr. Hooper, Mr. Nickerson have to. We've pretty much, I think, gotten the information from all of you. We really appreciate.
I don't know if they want to just hear any of Mr. Cohen's presentation, just in case they do have anything that comes out of something. So if you guys could just stick for a few minutes, it's not going to be an hour-long presentation. We've got the handouts. It's going to be kind of a quick. We've seen the presentation a couple of times, but your insight may help with some of it as well, if you don't mind. Greatly appreciated.
Mr. Cohen, if you would come up and identify yourself, and if you might assist us, given the fact that we have the folks here from the town, and the time is quite precious, could we
I'll speed through it.
speak to it and be pretty concise with regard to the presentation, okay?
This fall asleep? We need to reboot.
Technology.
Great when it works. Well, we have the paper.
Maybe
Yeah.
Okay. It was there.
It was a.
It was, I thought.
I don't know if it turned, if the light's blinking. Let's do.
Does everybody
Oh,
have
here
a,
it comes. It's
does
coming
everybody
back
have
to
a
life.
copy of this?
It's the same thing, it's just bigger.
Thank you.
Yep. Norm, I have that one too.
So I'm Bob Cohn. Thank you for allowing me to do this presentation. I'll try to zip it along.
If you want to move the microphone just a little bit, there you go.
Okay, can you hear me? So I sent you in an earlier version of this presentation, then I did some more research, and I came across this thing called the Pensacola Parking Syndrome. It describes a city that tears down its old buildings to create parking spaces to entice more people downtown until people no longer want to go there because it has become an empty lot. Now, that was written by the architecture critic at the New York Times. That's a term of art that they use. That is pretty much the theme of what I want to talk to you about. There's a danger of increasing parking. Parking lots will undermine what the quality and the charm and the character of a town. You look at Dennisport, the big CVS, big job lot and dollar store lot. It's not an attractive look, right? And the lot across at SC's, that's not particularly good looking lot. It's not inviting. The more lots you bring into a town, into a village, the less. I think there's a balance that needs to be struck, and there's pros and cons of having more parking. There are also cons, and so striking a balance is kind of the theme here in this presentation. There are three sections I want to talk about. The north of 28 issues, Pleasant Street and Miles and Cross. I did an informal parking survey. I can zip through that pretty quickly. And I wanted to get into some ideas about shared parking. I live on Pleasant Street, and that neighborhood is probably the most impacted by parking of any in Harwich Port. I can't think of any other. There are budding lots with some 200 spaces. South of Pleasant Street, there's the municipal lots, the two bank lots, there's the Mason Tree lot, there's the Anchorage lot, there's the Mineral lot, there's the Harwich Resort Club lots, and it's just a huge bunch of asphalt between 28 and Pleasant Street, and a lot of parking there too. So that produces traffic and congestion and access problems, as we just talked about with the Anchorage. There's noise that the noise that comes from the outdoor music venues comes over much more readily than it would in an ordinary setting. It amplifies it, so it creates a contentious situation between residents and the venues. Though it's legal, the municipal lot already extends 200 feet into the residential zone. On-street parking, we get crushed by that. Cross street on a daily basis. Wednesday night strolls overwhelm Cross and Pleasant. And the thing about it, one of the things about it is there seems to be an inequitable and unfair distribution of the parking burden in the town. South of 28, the streets, all the north-south streets, I think with the exception of Pine, are at some point marked no parking. So if you look at, some are more heavily, like Braddock there's a ton of no parking signs in Braddock. And C Street, I believe, has some no parking signs toward the beach. Other streets like Air and Pilgrim have no parking signs closer to the entrance to the neighborhood off of 28. What happens, I don't go there all that often, but I haven't seen that much on-street parking south of 28. But I have seen a ton north of 28. So there's an unfairness, and I think what has happened over the years is people didn't want beach parking, so they put up signs, and so parking kind of migrated north of 28 into the lots and then onto the streets. And during 4th of July week last year, I saw on Pleasant Street, I saw someone beach parking across from my house. And it's like, something's wrong with this picture. So we have all those pressures. And then this last summer, there was the discussion about the expansion of Schoolhouse Road lot. The wooded lot there is an important buffer to protect our street and the character of our street. If you look at the municipal lot from 28, looking north, the Chamber of Commerce building, in addition to all the great work that's done in the Chamber of Commerce, the building itself shields the view of that lot from 28. So it sets the actual parking away from the from 28. And rather than dominating 28 in the village, the parking lot is off to the side. And the same thing happens from the wooded lot, from Pleasant Street. That wooded lot is not just a screen, but it pushes 200 feet long, and it pushes that parking away from us. And it keeps it from impacting our street, our neighborhood, and the feel of our neighborhood. Pleasant Street is some 500 feet away beyond into the residential zone. So it seems to myself and our neighbors that it's pretty unreasonable to think about extending that parking lot there. I'm not sure about the exact number, but it's 650 on the plot plan I saw, and then 742 on Google Earth, minus 200. So I just picked 500. The 2014 parking study had a lot of good stuff in it, but it also had a huge blind spot in its regard for or thinking about the impact on residents. I mean, they had these great ways of putting the lines in different ways, and it come right up to the edge of Pleasant Street, but there's a blind spot there. So what we're looking for is some relief from the parking burden. And I'll tell you, the thing, every person that I've talked to, and all our neighbors, everyone said, without even being prompted, that we can live with this Wednesday night parking. We don't mind that. What we can't live with is removing that lot. So we'll continue on as is with the Wednesday night parking on our street. But taking that lot is really difficult for us. I don't know how to shift the burden of on-street parking from Cross Street somewhere else. It would be nice. And again, improved access for Anchorage. I feel bad that it's as in the previous discussion, I feel bad that it's legal, but it's inconvenient for them. So if there's a way to improve access for the Anchorage too, I'm all for it. Though I realize that, there are balances to be struck and so on. So that's it for the north of 28 issues. Any questions on that?
No, I don't
Okay,
think so.
okay.
Thank you.
Just,
Sure, sure.
and it's for the chief in regard, I believe parking on Pleasant and Miles now is one side only on Wednesday nights, is that true?
Unpleasant, yes.
Pleasant,
Yep.
not Miles?
I can't remember about Miles. I know Pleasant.
It should only be one side, because if you do two sides, it would create problems.
Same with Cross?
Only one-sided.
Chief, same with Cross, Chief?
I'm sorry, you got a microphone. I beg your pardon. There's two chairs, you don't have to leave.
Should only be one-sided. I didn't research apparently there's, bylaws going way back about which streets are supposed to be posted and which not. I didn't research that prior to this meeting, but just from past experience, if a street is not posted, it's usually, we try and do one-sided parking, pointed in the same direction as the travel lane.
And on Wednesday nights, the police does post temporary no parking signs all
All the way
around there.
down.
They've been doing that, yeah, so,
On one side or two sides, Mike?
On
one
one.
side, yeah, one side.
On
Right.
Cross, so one on every, okay.
One side. All right.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay.
I certainly am in agreement with Mr. Cohn and more than he probably thinks, but I agree. The parking, I'm an advocate of the parking lots. If I had my way, there'd be no parking on Pleasant Street or Miles Street. When you park on one side of those streets, it's tight for us, far worse than the parking lots are. Both sides of the street, impassable for us. We'll get through, but it's going to create a lot of paperwork. And I say that maybe tongue-in-cheek, but I'm serious. Good and the bad of what Bob is saying is that we find the most obstructive parking issues are the contractors and the lawn care professionals. I don't know where they're going to go, but they park on the entrance to the town lot. they take up 3/4 of the road. On Pleasant Street, if you need your lawn taken care of, you know, where are they going to park? I mean, we can't be selective, and I'm not trying to, you know, say, I got you, but they have big vehicles. But to me, trying to be reasonable, we'll make do, because there's no place for those folks to put their vehicles, and it's a necessary service. But that's a real issue for us. If we want to talk real issues, you know, 1-ton dump trucks with double axle trailers take up a lot of room. So, you know, if we're going to really take a hard look at this, we have to take a hard look at this.
I just mentioned that one of the good things about people parking on the street is it slows traffic down. So you get those big trucks out there, traffic slows down. In fact, my wife, when she works on the garden there, sometimes I park in front so that people, because they fly down Pleasant Street. And so, but again, we, as our neighbors, we are willing to live with the on-street parking on Wednesday nights. We aren't asking for that to be eliminated. We wouldn't mind it if it got eliminated or reduced, but our big thing is that wooded lot. We really, really want that to help preserve our neighborhood. So I got somehow carried away last summer, and I did a parking survey. So it's not professional. You know, it's not definitive. Things change week to week, year to year, with the weather, with the economic weather. So this is just another set of data points. I went out on my bike twice a day at midday and in the evening, and I took a bunch of photos and eyeballed the approximate availability of the different lots. And that's pretty much it. This is, I don't want to waste too much time on this, but I'll go over this quickly. It looked like, you'll see that Sunday and Monday at the top, I did those at 12 o'clock, with the others were at 1:30. And at the weather notes at the bottom, it says sunny beach. It was sunny and beach day pretty much the whole week, and with Tuesday being overcast and humid. The municipal lots were, throughout that week, the main municipal lot was pretty full up, except Monday, and the annex lot had different levels of availability. So there's still some room for parking in the annex lots. It was getting tight. The minnow was half full. The banks were pretty empty. The post office lot, and I'm not sure where the post office lot and the CVS True Value lot, or if it's all one thing.
It's all one.
Okay, so I looked.
Plaza.
Yeah. So.
Excuse me, if I may bring it to your attention that these lots you're referring to, these are all private property.
I know very much. I know.
And
Well, that's part of where I'm going with this, because I want to talk about shared parking with private-public shared parking. Okay. So the CVS True Value was around half full. Pilgrim Church there's a lot of emptiness. The Cape Side was pretty tight. The port, that little lot behind the port, was pretty full up. The Waystack building was hard to determine what was going on there because there's construction the whole summer. The Sunday school lot had like 90-95% availability, and that's a huge lot. There's 100 spaces or so there. And Ember Pizza was pretty much always full up. In the evenings, municipal lots were jammed. And Wednesday, if you look down the Wednesday column, everything was full up on Wednesday nights. The Tuesday column, you'll note that that's a little bit off because we went out that night, and so I took the readings at 5:45. Everything else is at 7:30 in there. The Wednesday night was at 8. The Mad Minnow was full up. The banks were pretty empty except on Wednesday nights. The post office was empty. The CVS was empty-ish. Pilgrim Church was fairly unused, as was the Waystack building. Everything else is pretty full up, including the Sunday school, which I think got even busier later in the night. Ember was just jammed. So I had, in addition, there's some photos. I don't know if we need to see them that much. Let me see. Let me get them. this is just for an example. So I just went through and, so here's, let me go back. So that's, where's that?
That's the Mad Minnow
That's
lot.
Minnow.
Minnow, okay, thank you. That's a Minnow again. That's a bank. That's another bank. It's a CVS. So that's the Pilgrim Church, and there's the Cape Side, and there's the Port lot, and there's, I think that's the Sunday school, right? Another shot of the Sunday school. So I just have, and there's Mr. Wastack's sign. So I was able to timestamp these, so here's, let's see, Wednesday, you don't want to see Wednesday evening, but here's Thursday evening. So you can, I've got them on a stick. Here's the School Street, the municipal lot on Thursday midday, okay. Let me get, oh, there's a truck there. But basically, if you want to verify my percentages, you can take a look at this. It's all approximate, it's eyeballed. I'm not saying that I get it perfect. It's just some guy out there taking photos and eyeballing it. So that's it. Any questions on the survey? Any more details?
No, there aren't at this point.
Okay. This got me thinking about shared parking. I started doing some research. I did a good deal more over this last week. So here's a typical quote. Shared parking takes advantage of the fact that most parking spaces are only used part-time by a particular motorist or group, and many parking facilities have a significant portion of unused spaces with utilization patterns that follow predictable daily, weekly, and annual cycles. That's from Victoria. And there's other quotes all over the place. I tried to find out what was being done locally, and I did a Google search of shared parking in quotes, Massachusetts, and I came up, this is a partial list. So all these towns and cities these aren't engaged in shared parking, but they're thinking about it. They're hiring reports by an outfit called, many of them are using an outfit called Nelson Nygaard. I have an example here of a report that was done for Concord. They're some very detailed reports. Wrong one. Here's an example for you.
Okay, thank you.
So people are in Massachusetts and all over the country are thinking about shared parking. It's a way to, it's like recycling was some years back. People are reusing spaces that are already there. It's sustainable, it's green. And what I saw were there are a lot of number of high-price reports, a number of changes to bylaws to account for shared parking between private owners. So in the accounting for the number of spaces that a new building might need.
Harwich allows that.
Okay.
We allow shared parking.
Okay. And then so some shared parking examples. Informally, Dino's lot was, the former Dino's lot was an example of informal shared parking. If you go to Del Mar, I've gone there and parked in the bank lot next door. That's an example of informal shared parking. I think it's informal. The Talkative Pig, you park across the street at the Christmas Joy shop, or the gift shop there. The Cape Side and Pilgrim, I always see overflow from Cape Side into the Pilgrim. I don't know if they're a shared lot or not, but I also have seen on Sunday mornings that the lot is cordoned off so that there's more parking for the church. So there's some sort of informal or perhaps a formal agreement between them. The post office, the shared parking lot that Charlene mentioned at CVS and True Value, and post office, that's a shared example. And I didn't hit this in the survey before, but the post office, some of the post office lot was filled up on a couple afternoons when there was a craft show next door. So that's effectively shared parking, right? There's an overflow, much like as was at Dino's. And on Wednesday nights, shared parking is all over the place. So it's like everyone parks everywhere. More formal examples, local examples of shared parking are in the TD Bank annex lot that the town leases. And that is from what I can tell, is a textbook example of shared parking, private-public shared parking, where the town leases a lot and makes it publicly available. So Harwich is ahead of the curve on this already. I wasn't even aware of it, but this is a thing. Chatham, I came across an article in the Chronicle about sharing of a proposed sharing that went before the Board of Selectmen, and I think it was Halloween time. They're looking to combine shared parking between the senior center and the community center for some 200 spaces, but I guess that didn't go through. And then,
Nowhere near each other, I don't understand that.
well, no, they were building a new place.
Which was nowhere near that.
Well, so they were going to, there was some
I
discussion.
live in Chatham.
Yeah, no, they were discussing about removing the Little League field, and it didn't go anywhere. So anyway, there was also discussion back in 2009 in Harwich itself, and this is the, this dates back. At the core of any successful shared parking arrangement is the idea that different uses have peak demands at different times of the day or night. For example, office use and dinner restaurants clearly have what is known as non-competing peak demands, as one building will be occupied primarily in the day and one in the night. So Harwich 9 years ago, was already tuned into this. And I don't know if we've forgotten it, but that's kind of where I want to drive this discussion. So there, this isn't, sorry, I need my glasses. So the difference between to contrast shared and non-shared parking. Traditional parking, you have spaces dedicated to particular users, which often stand empty and underutilized. So if you look at the bank lots, they have some partial usage during the day. In my survey, it was like 40, 50, 60%, but they were completely empty at night, except for people who are sharing it informally, who are parking there because they knew they could get away with it. Meantime, in shared parking, there's a use of the underutilized spaces. In traditional, there's inefficient use of land, often in core heavy use areas, right in the village core, whereas shared parking would be space efficient and would use land to maximum advantage. There can be cost inefficiencies. It may require additional lots if in the traditional way, or expanded new lots outside of town, which might require shuttle access. And shared parking can be more cost efficient. Traditional non-shared parking, because you always need to make your own parking lot, you don't share, they start building new parking lots further and further away, and which decreases convenience for the visitors who have to walk further, repark, and or shuttle. And that tends to make the core area less vital, less dense, whereas shared parking does not do that and will help to make it a more vital, walkable, inviting village. More parking lots, going back to the Pensacola parking syndrome, more parking lots are less attractive and have a greater impact on neighbors and residents, making it a less inviting and less attractive village, whereas fewer parking lots, again, maintains the village, makes it more inviting, more walkable, more livable, more inviting. One of the things that it seems to have maybe happening is that with the success of business, there's a more demand for parking, and with more parking, there will be increased business, and it's possible. You can see a cycle developing where, as business continues to grow, more parking is going to be needed, and so. If you're always building new parking, new lots, you reach a saturation point at some point, whereas trying to reuse existing parking can mitigate that. So there's a couple of case studies. I don't want to go too deep into these, but
If I may, though.
Yeah, sure.
Not to interrupt you, but we're getting the real gist of this.
Okay,
The thing is that Harwich, as we all know, Harwich Port, town of Harwich, it's a resort area.
Yeah.
It has limited land to put parking. What we are here for is to find the most viable areas to park motor vehicles so that our business community and the public have access to this downtown area of Harwich Port. We're not looking to build new parking lots, primarily because there is an awful lot of land out there to build, and if it is, it's gonna be sold, it won't be for a parking lot. So, I mean, I really appreciate what you've done here. You pretty much honed in on what we're trying to do here,
Okay.
and you've given us some food for thought.
If I may continue a little bit further.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll skip over this part. There's some case studies, and there's some issues. But here you can see that there's a number of potential spots for parking during the daytime and quite a lot during the night. The upshot of all that is that at any time in the village, there are 100-plus spaces available, unused, at least. So daytime, the Sunday school's got some 90 spaces unused, some 10-plus or 10-plus at Pilgrim Church and Post Office. There's 110 total there. In the evening, it's even more pronounced. There are some 65 at the two banks. The Waysack building has 15, 20, I don't know. Pilgrim Church has a number of spaces. And the CVS Post Office, that's a lot of, I counted through Google Map, 125 spaces. Even if the CVS is open until 9 o'clock, they aren't full up in the least. There's some 80 to 100 spaces there. There's 180 spaces available, unused, in the evenings in Harwich. That is twice as many as are in the municipal lot now. It would triple the availability in the evenings in Harwich. And finding a way to use those spaces through shared parking, evening only, would benefit Harwich in such a great way that I really think it's worth spending some time to investigate.
I'm going to jump in, unless
Yeah.
you want to jump
Yeah.
in.
I'm going to say the same thing, go ahead.
So, let's go back to this slide, thank you. The ones on the evening,
Yeah.
other than Richard, I'm going to touch on that in a second. Each of the two banks are more than willing and do let people park there during the evenings. But this is all going to be, as we're going forward, an education to the public with where the nighttime, daytime, whatever parking is allowed or available. So those two I know we can work with. Pilgrim, you keep highlighting Pilgrim Church.
Right.
That's a plot, only I want to explain it.
Okay.
It's a plaza. There are a number of businesses, retail,
Okay.
et cetera. Those spots back there, daytime, are for their clients and their customers.
Okay.
So when Cape Side Kitchen didn't take the front piece of that property where the bakery used to be, they're now just using the back part of the restaurant. That parking back there is for them. So to have shared parking in something, then we're taking away from what theirs is. So then they can't be successful. So CVS. Again, you've got Dunkin' Donuts, True Value, CVS, and the post office down there during the day. You can't take away from
No,
that.
no, I agree.
And they, this summer, put up do not park, or for business only, which is absolutely, it's a private lot for those businesses. Whoever the company is, and I can't remember, I don't have it with me, owns that building. That's for their businesses that rent space, just like the building up in East Harwich for 400 East. Those are their spots.
Right.
So we can't take from a private building.
I'm not
Richard's
suggesting
building.
take. I'm not suggesting take.
Share.
Okay.
I mean, if they want to, you know, it's kind of hard. Waste stack building. So this past year, when we sold what was then the Dino building, Mr. Manning bought that lot where that beautiful building is, which incorporates the parking behind, which was back in the day perceived public parking. Was never public parking, but you know, we all got used to it, so we did it. Anything around the perimeter of that is Mr. Waystack, which then includes the Jack Conway Realty as well as BYD, which is the insurance company. On the other side is Cranberry Liquors.
Right. I ignored
Which
that.
was perceived in that time frame also was that a staple restaurant, and it was a couple of restaurants over the years, to also enjoy that parking, which they've been educating all of us and the clientele to park in the municipal lot, because Hot Stove really, unfortunately, that's not their parking back there. The businesses that do own that parking are the new building, which will have our pretty retail spaces coming soon, hopefully, and Cranberry Liquors to the right when you're looking at it, and then the two offices to the left. So you can't take from that, shared or not. It's,
And actually, that's a great example of a private shared parking lot.
right. So,
Right.
unfortunately, back in the day, yes, it was, but now we're still working through the kinks of it to get everyone ready and educated to what it really truly is. And it was a purchase. I mean, you buy something, it's yours, you know. So we're working through the growing pains of that. So, as yes, we would love in a perfect world to have some. We're suggesting taking 90 spots from Sunday school as shared, that, you know, to shared parking. But in all actuality, if you want to have a hot fudge sundae on a Monday at 2 o'clock, well, if somebody else is parking in your spot, how are you going to, you know, so.
Well, no, that's daytime, and.
I know, I'm
and-
seeing it, 90.
Yeah, so I'm not suggesting you would go that high.
Right.
Nor do I even think that we should tackle daytime parking now. But
know-
what you said about the banks, if they're willing, the only problem there is the signage there says tow zone, so no one knows about that.
Because during the day, that is that.
They need their parking during the day when
Right,
they're open.
exactly. So, you know, part of what we had talked about last week was what we're working on with the employee parking and kind of coming up with the plan for the off-site. But also, something that we're working on during the whole cultural district designations is a new map that's going to have where you can park. So I'm having one, and being a chamber, we're nonprofit, so I'm taking this on for us and for, you know, educating everyone to put on that where our confirmed parking is, public parking. And certainly, when we're going through the steps of this with the employee parking, you know, we're going to reach out to the two banks to just say, hey, on the map, are you okay with evening parking available? So we're going to have, but again, it's all going to be educating the masses out there.
Let me move forward a couple slides. So if you could put up signs like this at the banks, bank parking only Monday to Saturday, 8 to 5, public parking all other times.
Cindy, take a picture.
From a private property owner standpoint, I think that the banks or any business is gonna have a problem with this, only because of if somebody gets injured. You know,
Right.
they've been
So
warned
it's-
that there's park here and you can get towed.
Right.
If you're not using
I-
that
I'm not,
facility.
I'm not suggesting to put this up without anything else. I'm suggesting to get into a relationship, much as the relationship is with the TD Annex lot, to formalize the relationship with the town and the banks, so that the banks, the town leases that space in the evenings and makes it available to the public in the evenings. And then there would be some enforcement issues to make sure that there was availability during the daytime. But if you could do that, there's some 65 spaces there, which would be a huge boon to public parking. And if the banks are actually willing.
Go ahead, John.
Unofficially, I mean, this is a great idea. I think unofficially, we're doing a great job of it now. And the reason I say unofficially is what Charlene just brought up. We can't tell you to park there, but there's lots over there. Okay, I think once you get into, I don't think we are able, in the state we're in now, to direct anybody to a private lot. You know, I know what happens at CVS. People that park in the live in the campgrounds tell their guests to park at CVS. That becomes an issue I don't think we want to get, or you as the chamber, want to get involved with. I think unofficially, other than Wednesday nights, and correct me if I'm wrong, the unofficial shared parking seems to be working. I mean, I know people park at the waste deck, the new building now. You go there, you go to the hot stove at night, and they park back there.
Well, in the survey I did, there wasn't a lot of parking going on at the banks. They were pretty empty, except for Wednesday nights.
You know, it's gonna depend on where the business is coming from. So if I'm Joe resident or visitor coming to look and go to one of the restaurants, if I don't find parking there, I may not know or to think.
Right.
But again, it's gonna be, and this is all an education process, that we need to let the public know that when you're coming, and we can do, once it's all definitive, we can do, contact the Chronicle. Bill Galvin loves to come and talk to me. And we'll go through and say, okay, here's your checklist coming into town, and we can have it on our website. Parking available in Harwich. Make it pretty, bold, whatever. But until, the CVS lot this year, that was the first time that they had ever put up that. And it's because people were taking advantage, and then their businesses weren't getting to have parking for their customers. So, again, taking away from a private business is going to be a hard thing for someone to say, yes, I absolutely take our parking. We know that, yeah, in the evening probably we can work something out with the CVS post office. Daytime,
So,
no.
I'm really glad you're thinking about this. What I'm suggesting,
It's not that we haven't either. It's, this is something that we've been thinking about for many years, but also trying to keep the success and, you had mentioned the Mad Minnow parking lot. That's a private, that's for those 5, 6 businesses in there. And unfortunately, what happened to them this year was a lot of people, because at the chamber, I instructed our volunteers to not say that, yes, this is a public lot for beaches, because we're trying to educate people that this is for our downtown, our shops, our restaurants, and galleries. So it was filtering in, people were taking advantage of then the Mad Minnow lot. And, a wonderful business that's in there, the Snow Goose, she would watch people, and that's not fair. So to say, let's see if we can share with them, no.
No,
Because these guys are trying in a very short window to be successful. But also, all of us as residents enjoy going into those places as well. So we need to kind of help them continue to grow, or else we're just going to see the fences go up at the end of 28 on either side and say, okay, thank you very much, we're not warm and fuzzy anymore, as our brand says. We're the warm side of the Cape, so let's be warm and fuzzy. So, yes, there are some opportunities, not as many as I see up here already, but certainly some that can be approached to say, hey, how can we make this work legally, but also safety-wise? If the bank is closed at night, there may be insurance issues and liability.
This is exactly where I'm heading. I think if the town were to lease those lots in the evenings and make them publicly available, put up sandwich boards at the entrances, and no, I'm absolutely dead
That's
serious.
another bone of contention, but no, we're not going to do the
Well, no, I
sandwich
thought I heard that for municipal uses it was okay.
Well, it doesn't mean municipalities like putting those signs up.
Okay.
Exactly. No,
Less signs.
Okay, but if there's a way to do this on the up and up, so that the shared parking that is on an informal basis can be formalized, then I think there's winners all around. If you can get, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think one thing that I've noticed, because I grew up here in Harwich, and this is an awesome problem to have, because we're so busy, and so many people love being in Harwichport, the property values have gone up, people wanna be in Harwichport. We do summer rentals, we do sales, everybody wants to be in Harwichport. They don't really typically want to be to the other parts of town because there's so much to do right here, and it's so great to see the activity and the growth. When I was a kid, you had George's Pizza, the movie theater, and maybe John Fred's or something, and that was, otherwise you just passed either way. So this is an awesome problem to have. I think what we're talking about with the shuttle route that we're trying to do, and I think the chief brought up both chiefs with a great point, with trying to get that sidewalk extended, and maybe reaching out to Julian Sear and Sarah Peak and so forth. Maybe we can help push that along too, because that's another certainly great opportunity. But with the 30 to 40 cars or so that we can probably alleviate by doing the shuttle program, if it works and we get some buy-in from the businesses and so forth, I think we'll alleviate a huge amount of the problem. As far as the parking in the back, and I know that's a big thing, a sensitive piece with taking down those trees. I don't think anybody really wants to take down those trees. It was certainly highlighted as kind of the only options in this parking study.
And it's
but
important to note that that is still not off the table.
Right, it's not off the table, so what
It's
we're trying to do
entirely
is.
up to the Board of Selectmen if they want to move that direction, but it's not off the table at this point that I'm aware of. So
Right.
I don't want anybody leaving here thinking, oh, I heard that the committee meeting that you know, oh, they're not gonna do it.
Right, so there's up to, one of the plans, the maximum plan, I think, allows for up to 83 parking spaces. And that would also solve the problems. But I think what we're trying to do is come up with alternative solutions that we can all agree on, to be sensitive to our neighbors, to help with the growth of the town, which is exciting and fantastic, and make it work for everybody. So it's not just like one side or the other side, or, you know, us against them. It's trying to make it all work for everybody. And I think those solutions that were coming so far, including some of the shared parking we're already doing, the TD Bank spot, we're already doing some of that, is working. And I think we can continue to make progress using some of the solutions that we're already putting in.
Okay, so I just saw a lot of availability, a lot of underutilized spaces in the evenings and at the daytime, but mostly in the evenings. And if there's a way to utilize those spaces, particularly at the bank, which is really central, if there's a way to do that and increase it, maybe the way Ms. Williams is talking about through whatever process, but they do have no tow zone. Yeah, so that kind of thing would have to change. So an informal way would be great if we can pull it off. But then there are the liability issues, and so if there's maybe a semi-formalized way of doing it, that you say the town will indemnify the lots if you will put up such and such signage and allow people to park there.
If I may, I want to thank you very much.
Okay.
You've been extremely helpful with your information. You put a lot of time and effort into it. You've certainly given us some food for thought. And given what each of you has said to us, we can utilize that information. The sidewalk is a big issue. That's going to address some of the issues with regard to this presentation. This is going to evolve relatively rapidly, the way this community has been growing. And these plans, we're just doing a small portion of it. But this entire community down here is eventually going to be drawn into it in a relatively short period of time with regard to the parking. We cannot invent it, but the old, and I always refer to the old fire barn, is a pretty strong option right now for probably close to 40 cars that we might be able to eliminate from the downtown area if it goes. Addressing your concerns and the concerns of the condominium complex. Is it going to be a solving of everything? No. We're going to address it. It'll be steps. And somewhere down the road, and relatively short road, I hope, we may be able to help this community grow. And everybody's going to have to accept there's going to be discomfort in this growth. There's no two ways around it. And anybody from the board got any further questions? Anybody from the public have any questions of us?
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Chairman, since you've talked about the sidewalk a number of times, I'd like to brief you very quickly on the progress that the town has made on that subject matter. Back in 2014, the Board of Selectmen wrote Mary Jo Perry, District 5 Director for Mass DOT, a letter requesting that sidewalk because the town knew they were going to be sinking some real money into the harbors. What we got back was looked on face value as a commitment to build such sidewalk. However, that doesn't appear to be the case. The town administrator last year, or probably 2 years ago, asked me for an estimate to construct a sidewalk. If that was a public right-of-way, we could do that for about $250,000. He secured $250,000 at a subsequent town meeting to do so. We've had numerous discussions and meetings with Mass DOT to prod them along to construct a sidewalk. We've offered to make a non-contributory contribution of $250,000 directly to Mass DOT to construct a sidewalk, which they declined. We have engaged our legislators. What came of that was, why don't you apply for a MassWorks grant? We engaged an engineering firm to design that and help us with that application. Charlene was gracious enough to assist a great deal in that application. There was a lot of information, a lot of business information associated with that. Mass DOT did do a survey out there. We utilized that survey, and we spent about 10 grand doing some preliminary engineering to show the feasibility of building the sidewalk. What came out of that exercise was a declination of the Mass Grants program, which we do not have any real detail to date of why it was declined. We know that the construction cost, believe it or not, for 3,300 feet of sidewalk is roughly $700,000. Again, if this was the right-of-way, I'd task Mr. Nickerson behind me to build it, and we could do it for about $250,000. Mass DOT, and we work quite cooperatively with a lot of them, but in this instance, they seem to put up every reason why not rather than why we can. I just want you to know that the town administrator, the Board of Selectmen, the chiefs, the DPW has been working on this, and the town planner for a number of years to no avail. It does not look like it's going to happen unless, enough squeaky wheels get to some real decision makers. I have witnessed Mass DOT when the governor or the director says, we have a problem here, or there's a fatality. I have seen them do something like this very quickly. I know they could do this under a miscellaneous construction contracts that they already have in place, if they were told. There's also been some residents along the way that have written me, one just yesterday, as a matter of fact, asking what the status of this was. I did not advise them. I shared the actual Mass Grants application and the declination letter we received with them. So there is a lot of momentum, a lot of people that want to get this done. Rest assured, town employees have done their best to get this done.
So Lynn, question for you. Say we had somebody that said, okay, I've got the money, private person, says, okay, here's the money that you need for that. Is that something that could happen?
Mass DOT says that they would be willing to allow the town of Harwich to pull a construction permit and construct it to their standards through their review process. Again, we engaged VHB to design this, or preliminarily design it. And the real money is spent at the river crossing. There's a culvert there. You need to, and it's not that big of a culvert, but because of the age, you have to support it all. So the structural analysis, and it goes into that, would probably be building a pedestrian bridge for pedestrian connectivity that you could drive a tractor trailer over. Right? And that's where the money is. But the answer is yes. If we had $700,000 to design it and jump through their processes, yes, we could.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Link.
Got a sugar daddy hiding somewhere there, Cindy?
I'm not going to comment, but.
That was interesting, I'll tell you that much.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to listen to me and beg you, please, don't take down that wooded lot.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kim, we appreciate it. At this time, I'd like to thank all of you for spending your time coming in. We appreciate your input. We'll see what happens with that sidewalk. And we probably won't have much influence on it whatsoever, but, although, maybe over here might. Thank you all for coming in, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
We're all set
Oh,
for
are
next
we
meeting,
meeting
right?
on the
No, we
ninth-
gotta
on
do,
the
we got another
February-
meeting coming up, yeah. What do you wanna do?
Yeah, on the, we
19th,
have one
we have a
scheduled for the
19th.
19th.
19th, okay, that's
You
what
and
we
I
said?
can work next week, early next week
Yeah.
on the agenda?
Okay.
Okay. I still make a motion to adjourn.
Okay,
Mr. Cohen?
No, I was done off the side.
okay. All right, we have a motion to adjourn,
Second.
second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So voted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good meeting.
Stop this.
Yep.